Hi guys, Frankie V from Frozen Sand with another episode of Working with Power Tools, which is our little effort, if you just happen to stagger in here, to ensure our community at large, our merry band of rebels, that indeed we are doing something behind the scenes, besides just cruising for the cruising the forums for a little bit of troll bait, which isn't really a bad thing, but certainly have been progressing, and it is somewhat a kind of a cycle of information, getting the information out, of doing a lot of real exciting stuff that are maybe of interest to somebody else, and then getting into these cycles of sheer boredom that if you're not actually doing it, then you got to kind of evaluate the general interest, as opposed to putting something out there that looks like watching somebody else play a game or make something. Is it really all that interesting? I'll leave that up to you guys. If you want to encourage that kind of thing, by all means, come to our forums and kind of mention, hey, we need something, a little bit more information. We need something new, something interesting to be brought up and presented and put it out as video blog format, or put it on a show. That hopefully will be a little bit more entertaining, besides me just sitting around on my duff talking at a microphone of what I'm working on right now. So this is where I am right now as far as what I'm working on. So you see those topics that come up. What are you watching on YouTube? What are you doing working, in this case, what are you doing right now working in Unreal 4? So this is what I'm doing right now as far as working on Unreal 4 goes. And as some of you have noticed, this is once again a very predominant map in Unreal 4, in Urban Terror, called Casa, that we've been on again and off again and developing it over time to as part of the upgrade progression that is Unreal 4. Now, I mentioned far back, many moons ago, that there were some issues from going from UDK. Some of you who've been here from the start know that we've started doing a lot of our testing using UDK as far as how things would look, particularly as to Casa, on a one-to-one conversion. I even did a series on it, I believe, that explains the conversion process from taking it from id 3 and what it took to actually get it into Unreal 4 as far as what we see visually. So lighting wise, there was a severe, let's say, lack of quality difference between what we were seeing in UDK versus our initial first impressions of what we had in Unreal 4, which was rather disappointing. Everything kind of looked flat, and the shadow, there was no impact, no three-dimensional effect that we had, based on just a real super simple conversion of it. So that's what we have here right now, is Casa, as far as geometry and textures goes, is exactly what you would see in id 3/Urban Terror 4.3, as far as materials and textures and geometry goes, and nothing fancy. Yeah, it's been stripped of foliage and what have you, and bring everything down to the hardwood floor, so to speak. Strip off the paint off the wood, and this is what we have as far as the conversion goes. So if id 3 had a nicer rendering engine, then this is what you would see it as far as that goes. And then we're kind of expanding out on that as far as putting in the detailing goes, one little bit and piece at a time, which I'll get into in a moment. So you can see over here, I'm going to put this over into modes because we're not ready to talk about this little setup here just yet. But let's go ahead and take a bit of a fly around and maybe a bit of a walkthrough to kind of get an idea what's going on here. Much nicer lighting without having to fight for it. You should be able to put in a directional light, a skylight, and a fog effect or whatever, and there should be a certain level of expectation. It is a video game engine, so if you put these elements in, you should get it should look good. Unlike in an application like 3ds Max, looking good is a huge rendering requirement that could take something that you would need that you're working on, a draft mode, and I could require days just to render out a single image. So even straight out of the box, even though that this has been rendered at draft, I believe my build lighting quality was lighting quality was production. Okay, so that was good. So we've been kind of working on and off based on not just making an environment, making a map, but actually to kind of weed out the process of being able to create a co-op type of process between as many developers who wants to work on this particular map at a single time. And I'll get into that once again. And of course, one of the things that the ability that we have is to create a full tub environment. So this is this is something I came across. I was just sort of cruising through the marketplace one day, and I saw this arid environment for $10. I figure, heck, for $10, it's already the work that I wanted to do was already done. I just had to figure out a way to be able to introduce this into a level that was non-destructive as far as what's going on inside it, so to speak. So let's go ahead and we'll hit the play. Hopefully nothing will explode on us. And of course we have 13 unbuilt objects. We'll ignore that. I just don't want to have to stop everything to spend another hour or two rebuilding the lighting when it really doesn't have little impact. But what we want to see here is, since we have a full tubbing effect, optional wise, what we could do is, for example, is remove sections of the map quite easily, because everything is based on modular. So for example, that building goes boom, everything is disconnected and is a modular component as part of the map overall. So we can expand outside this area here for, let's say, visual effects. Like we can create a really nice forested part of a forest or foliage type of background, and then put in a metal fence across here that keeps the player inside the map, so they're not looking into this claustrophobic type of feeling of looking at walls. So that is obviously an option, something that as an idea that we can play with. Let's see if I can bring it back. Yeah, okay. Control H brings it back to the hidden objects. So that's something about that as an idea that we can explore about not limiting the boundaries of the environment. Obviously, you want to keep the players inside the environment, but at the same time, we can kind of make it look larger. So here's a good spot to take a look at. As an example, is if we hide that wall. Once again, we can build that out. So you're looking out into this nice little lake area in the mountains, and there might be some foliage. We can put some deer eating. I don't know if that would be appropriate, but we can include animals and what have you. And we'll bring the wall back in again. Trees up on the mountainside. Just to kind of point it out too as well, we have, I would say, stewardship over the Casa. Meaning that the map maker, the original map maker, I believe it was Tub, supplied us with the original source .map file, and doing the right thing, we're going to be leaving in the various different taggings and what have you. They stay in place, and of course the original mapper gets full credit as the designer. So all we're doing is spiffy job, lube job, so to speak. So go back to our play mode. And overall, a nice, well-balanced light as a base to work on. I still have a little bit of annoyance with the grounding of the buildings. The ambient occlusion works well on the corners. It creates a sense of directional changes without actually destroying the illusion, so, more or less. But getting that grounding is going to be something that has to be dealt with one way or another if we want to make this look super special. Okay, so got to back up a bit. The materials that are applied to this as far as texturing goes is one-to-one to what you would expect to see it in Tag 3 / Urban Terror 4.3, and we've started doing some side types of improvements. Like much nicer arches will be done. The impact of geometry is negligible, magical, I can't pronounce that, is is something not to be too overly worried about, let's say. Okay, so these are all instant copies off of one, which means that the one next to it's the same as the first one we just selected. So if we have dozens of nice little archways and what have you, its memory footprint is equal to the one that we've actually pulled our copy off of. Materials obviously is something that we want to buff up a bit, but at the same time we don't want to overly destroy the continuity. So the texturing is not too bad, but obviously when you get up close it looks very much let's say 1999 256x ish, like with no PBR type of materials or shaders applied to it. Okay, so that's where we are as far as Casa goes. The next step from this, it would be to put together some materials and textures and to try to maintain the original continuity of it. Not necessarily to make it identical, but I'm quite sure we can find some half-decent brick with patchy type of plaster on it, with a rock base, with wood trim and what have you, by breaking things down into a little bit more modular pieces. And the result would look almost identical, but a really snazzy looking PBR type of effect to it. Once again, not really a heavy duty type of impact as far as performance goes. That's something that the engine does very well on its own without any interference as far as optimization goes, is it manages the basics, so to speak. It's when you start getting into things that are a little bit more fancy where things can start to pull the overall performance down, particularly if you're using a lot of non-unique items. For example, another example is all the balconies are all based off of one balcony, so it's a instant copy. So no matter how much detail or how many that we use, it's still going to count as one as far as the impact of performance goes. Okay, so now that kind of brings us to the flip side of what it is that Casa actually represents as far as co-opting goes. Is we need to speed things up a bit as far as getting away from one-to-one development of an environment where the map maker is also both the chef and the bottle washer kind of idea, and getting more people involved into single environment development based on well, more or less keeping out of each other's way or stepping on anybody's toes, as far as building up a volume of space that is directly under somebody's control. And this is where the idea of levels streaming comes in. I sort of presented the ideal earlier as far as being able to let's say manage the scene a little bit easier as far as being able to reuse a lot of stuff. Okay, so we'll start off with something that's really a rather basic need, and that is master lighting. Now, master lighting, it would be things like a directional light, a skylight, any kind of environmental modifier like a fog effect, a post-process, as well as what is it called? That thingamajigger that restricts the amount of lighting information inside a box. Importance volume, I believe it's called, something like that. Light mass, importance volume. Okay, so I'm going to start abbreviating that stuff. That's probably easier to remember. So to be able to maintain the blocking idea, we need a master lighting environment. And if you look at some of the samples that are coming out from Epic, a lot of these samples use a single lighting volume, and all it contains is whatever it is that's necessary for the light mass to be able to use sunlight, be able to use directional light, use fog, and skylight, the dome, and what have you. And we put this into a level all by itself. So if we turn off the level view, then all our lighting disappears. And we basically have zero lighting effect right now, which leads to something of an interesting concept and idea. So you could, there's something to try. Is if you'll get errors, but an error is only an indication that the light mass has changed as far as the background goes. So if you think about it, we can turn off the the master lighting, introduce a different type of lighting setup, and we got this really nice type of environment where we can start putting in different lighting elements and make it look a little bit more interesting as far as the background, which could be like a nighttime sky or what have you. So this would be, if you think of Egypt, well, how they kind of light up the pyramids kind of idea, it has a grandeur to it. So it certainly would be something worthwhile to investigate. But the ability to have our master lighting into a single file is we can use the same lighting solutions for every type of blocks or layers that we want to introduce into our main map as part of the flow through, as being able to co-op a map as large as, say, Casa, for example, is. It also gives us the opportunity, since it's in a file by itself, to use this one file in any kind of other project that we wish to use the same kind of lighting solutions into. So if we make a really super hot nighttime type of master lighting setup, or rainy type of environment setup, or snowy type of environment setup with all these different components that represent what is actually happening in world space, then we can save these up as well, let's say starter templates, where you can put them in, you can move them from one map level to another, to another, to another. But where this plays into the idea of being able to use these for different block levels, of course, is we can separate and segregate the different types of areas that would become, let's say, under the domain of the person working on that particular area. Hope that's not too confusing. So we'll get to that in just a minute now. But to kind of run over top of the need, another need is to be able to configure environments for various different types of gameplays. So let's say, for example, you're doing capture the flag, you're doing what we need, of course, is survivor and bomb mode, and of course deathmatch and what have you. Casa, as we know, divides the map up based on the game type that's being played, by limiting the voluminous playing area that the player can be in, and as well as the spawn points of where they would have to spawn within that game type. So let's say, for example, I believe in a particular game type, there's a gate across here that prevents anybody from going out of this area, and they have to be spawned into this area over here. So to be able to do that, once again, you can do that by layering based on the features that are available as part of this level. So player starts. If we, as you can see, it's not visible right now. Okay. Well, whoops. We need to get out of the game mode. But if we turn it on, there's our player starts. If we turn them off, there's our player starts gone. There they are. There they go. There they are. So this would actually indicate, if we hit the player start now, we would start where a player start should be, I believe. Close enough to it. Yeah, see, there's a player start right there. That's where we spawned. So if we hit play again, we should spawn where another one of those player starts is. There's the other one on the other side. There it is. So we spawn in those areas. If we turn off player starts, visibility, and we hit play, now we are going to spawn exactly where we were, where there is no spawn points, because there are no spawn points in the persistent level at the moment. And the persistent level, the only thing in persistent level is this information down here. There's no geometry or anything that's associated with this particular level. And of course, we can save each of these levels individually from one another as part of the co-op. So that solves that problem. So we could call this, for example, rename this to capture the flag starts, or it could be bomb mode starts. It could be anything. And we can change the streaming method. So in this case, if we want this to be bomb mode, we can change the streaming method to blueprint. Save word must be visible before save. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to change this to visibility to change to blueprints. We just did that. So now, if we were to hit play, these as a geometry would disappear until we create a blueprint that said make these appear. So in this case, if we start the game, we can add a value, like you know how we change theme types in by applying a value to the game that you want to type that you want to play. So If CTF is 1, we feed 1 into the blueprint, which turns on the spawn spots. This also is the system you would use for, let's say, fences or gates that are introduced into your environment. So if we, actually this one's fixed locked. So if we turn this on and off, you can see how the gates kind of disappear, which allows you to run through it. Now we can change the streaming mode on these once again, streaming minutes to blueprint, and then of course if we go ahead and hit play, oops, okay, I don't think we were high enough. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so we're up here, we hit play. Ah, why is it doing that? I think that's because, okay, player starts. Okay, let's try this one more time. We'll say start from here instead, or play from here. Okay, so if we hit play from here, the fence is now gone. Of course, it leaves the shadow. So for these type of elements, they would have to be dynamic objects instead of static. But and of course, we'd have to get rid of the collision that's been assigned to it, so we can run into these different areas. And then of course we just assign these initialize our gates as part of the level based on the game type, blah blah blah, or we can just say okay, load that, and then we hit play again, and there we go, that's better. And there's our fences back again. So this is how you would configure a map for any kind of player type of modifications that you want to your environment to occur based on the game type. Quite simple, quite easy. You just create a level with the toys that you need, the equipment that you need for that particular game type, in a separate level, and then you could you can toggle it on and off based on the game type using the blueprint. Simple, easy. No muss, no fuss. Everything as part of that level is managed as a single batch process, which is nice. Okay, so now let's get into the bread and butter, meat and potatoes, or whatever you want to call it, of this, what we have set up here. As you noticed, as you may have noticed when excuse me, when I did that series on map conversions, of how I broke things down into blocks that were identified by wasn't identified by any type of unique identifiers. You know, it was just a block. It was a piece of data that filled a space, which made it easier to manage the layout based on being able to introduce those into Unreal 4 under folders which contain the information that is representative of that occupation of a three-dimensional space inside our level here. Just take that one step further, we can take these whatever data is contained in these folders as being unique to say a persistent level, and farm those out to into individual files as part of the streaming method here, which we can either put in as I mentioned, as either a blueprint or always loaded. So when we load the game in, it just simply takes the individual file and loads it in, and boom, off you go. We'll take a little bit closer look at just what we can do with these in just a minute here. But what this allows us to do is break things down into more manageable chunks, where a person who's working on a particular area is not stomping on somebody else's work, because they can limit their amount of work to a particular volume of space as a block. So in this case, Johnny English, nice of him to kind of join in. He's helping us with the back end of things, as well as hopefully one day be able to convey how this stuff is actually working in a practical manner back to say a group like custom map makers, for example. But we want to stay out of his way. He's working on the marketplace area here at the moment. He hasn't got the canopy on yet. We converted it over to a different engine, so unfortunately he lost all his cable work that he had out here, and you know, he's putting in canopies. He wants to change things around, and he doesn't want to be interfered by somebody else coming through and moving his stuff around inadvertently or otherwise. So and the interesting thing about, of course, is when we're working within blocks, is we can turn off his work and not have to worry about being being a big pain in the butt and messing up his stuff. But we can move stuff out of the way so we can see what's happening underneath it as far as buildings that are attached to it. So for example, block 29 is a block on its own, which if I look up here somewhere, there it is. I can turn the visibility of that off and proceed through connecting stuff, other stuff too as well. Now if we select this by just clicking on it, you can see how it's blue now. This now becomes the working level. In other words, anything that I throw into the scene here goes into block 29, and then when we're done for the day, we can lock that off and nobody can change it. Like if you see that, you got to kind of respect it. You don't say, okay, I won't change that because it's locked out or what have you. So the other benefit to this is, for example, if we do make a change, let's say if we move that, and we look at marketplace. Oh, interesting. Nothing's changed there. It should have changed. What if we move that? Yeah, okay. You can see this. The icon is now changed to a save icon, meaning that we can now save this block out by itself. And then when we upload it to the SVN, it's only uploading this part of the change to the SVN. We will obviously get an error. We will get an error, of course, because the lighting would be, something's changed. The lighting would have to be rebuilt, but now the master builder can then turn around and redo and rebuild the lighting, and then push back out the clean build as time goes by. So that kind of works as far as speed of iteration goes. If we were to send this out as Casa as one big file, it's fairly large. I don't know. I haven't even checked into see how big it is currently, but let's say it's 500 megs. That's a pretty long upload. Like downloads is not a problem. Uploads always seems to be slower than downloads. So by breaking things down into blocks, all you're responsible for doing is making sure that your block that you're working on gets uploaded to the SVN, and it takes about 10 seconds or less. So it's very, very fast as far as iteration goes, because you're not working on the entire persistent level on one go. You're simply working on the block levels which is available to you. Now this comes in handy once again, where we can actually don't have to worry about all we're worried about is making sure our stuff looks good once it's introduced into the big build, so to speak, and we're using the master lighting to light everything as far as a final deliverable goes. So what you could do, if you wish in this case, and probably will do, is since these are all individual files, they're put in Casa into a folder for the purpose of keeping their head straight of support levels. Support level is all these individual blocks and elements that are here individualized as a single file. So in this case, block 33, let's see if we can find block 33 here. And we'll go ahead and load that. And I'm not going to save that as work in progress. And believe it or not, there's block 33, which we can work on standalone. But, it looks pretty nasty. This is where you can add existing, and we can go down to our maps, and we can go to our support assets. And I think it's in support assets. Is it? No, not support assets. Oh, what am I doing? It's in support levels, and I'm looking for our master lighting. There it is, and it gets loaded in, and we can see how that is affecting our particular building. Of course, it doesn't look too good, but let's go ahead and do a quick build. We'll change our lighting quality. I'll leave production for last, just to see if we can quickly do a rebuild on this to see how it's going to look with the lighting that is established, that we know is being used in Casa when we do the big build. Okay, so there we go. So it gives us a better sense of what's going on, and if we wanted to, hopefully this is not going to take forever, we can change the production value up and decrease our build time for just this one item, so we can build the ultimate building that fits within that footprint. Don't have to worry about anything. As you can see, the lighting building at production level is tremendously faster than it would be if we're doing the entire Casa by itself. On my rig, I have some ponies behind it, so it usually takes to do Casa, to do a production grade build, usually takes about let's say about 2.5, maybe 3 hours, and as compared to some maps that could take up to, you know, a lot longer than that. It could take days and days, depending on the kind of let's say final result that you tune it to. You know, if you want like the ultimate quality of lighting, kind of speak. But you know, being able to work on it by itself, you can certainly start to see, whoa, we got some like little bit of flaws here that can be corrected. We can iterate it, and we can save this block out. And of course, when we do an SVN update, it only updates block 33, which is part of the bigger build. But we're not stomping on anything else in the process too as well. Okay, so that you can start seeing how there's more of a cyclic nature to it all. You're not having one person having to build one environment, but you can start having all these little busy beavers all working within this layer without getting involved with one another. So before we actually do save this, we want to remove selected. I'm not sure how that would affect if we left this in place. And if we remove that lighting permanently, these levels will be lost. Any changes, blah, 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 boom. There we go. And of course, when we bring this back in over to the big build, to whatever it is that we've making our persistent level in, then that brings everything in at once. And of course, the light maps that are involved with this, it will still probably say, oh yeah, okay, your lighting solution is now wrong. But you can see how through iteration we can just do everything quickly without having to rebuild, see how it works, how it looks, build, stomp on somebody else's work, and all this kind of thing, where we can actually kind of stay out of each other's way. Now, another benefit to this too, of course, as far as level editing goes, let's see if we can quickly just hopefully, okay, we can reload this back up again, close that out, don't save, hopefully we're just quickly. Okay, if anything kind of goes boom. My top secret stuff there. Okay, we go up to our map section. So I could have just reloaded it back in. Now, if we had saved that, of course, it brings it back in. But that's not what I want to show you. What I want to show you is each block has the ability to have its own world blueprint built into it. So if we want, we can build all our toys, our game types within a level, and the element and the entities within that level determines the game type. So if we put a couple of flags all in a level, and we say, okay, we want to play CTF, boom, the level is loaded in for you, and it configures, and the blueprint, the level blueprint, actually configures whatever needs to be done as far as the UI goes, or how scoring is kept and what have you, as part of that level. So we can produce levels that are entities onto themselves without the map maker actually having to go in and configure the any kind of parameters. So once again, this is kind of stuff of what would be work as an ideal kind of thing. So have I gone over anything as much as I could as far as development goes? This actually, I don't know if I mentioned it, but this folder actually corresponds to what we have as far as our SVN goes. We have two separate SVNs, one's for the development of the game, actual, to keep it nice, thin and compact. The only way you can commit or send to it is by permission only, and you have to have a proper level access to do that, versus our content folder, which is where we kind of experiment with the different types of ideas to kind of, feed, to kind of test in real time the practical applications of going with this kind of workflow. Do everything in the levels. What we don't know is there any kind of inherited type of performance issues as to doing level streaming in this manner. But since level streaming is used in general for making extremely large environments, there's nothing that says you can't really you can't use it for this kind of purpose of being able to get somebody to work on this building over here, which is block 7-A, and we can go to our block here and find block 7A. It's block 7. We double click on that. We're actually working on that one block, and we're not messing around with Johnny English's marketplace, which is what he's been working on lately, and we keep things a little bit more separate that way. So there's a lot more little, let's say, I don't know if they're interesting. That there's also a significant amount of little things that make you go, we can do this. So this is the big one. If you can keep everything in this kind of configuration, doing things like material work as a separate file, as I demonstrated, is a lot easier to focus on, and then bring it in and see how it reacts with the environment. You put all your gizmos and widgets into, as far as lighting goes, into a separate folder, and we can reuse those in any kind of project that we wish. Hopefully in a year from now we'll have 100 different type of master lighting environments where we just drag and drop into our levels, and it's done for you without having to spend an hour, 2 hours making sure that everything's set up properly. So one last little item here is things like isolated map objects. Now map objects or collision, for example, is a separate level, which is the map collision. Means that the collision that's been put into place that defines the volume of space, so the player's not running outside the map into the mountain range kind of idea. It's literally a separate file unto itself where all these little collision elements are kept into, and it becomes a lot easier to be able to find what that one collision that you have to make changes to. Grounds, we might decide later that obviously that we might want to change it out. You can see that I have this is the dummy plate, so to speak, as a landscape object that's underneath the environment. This is part of that out there, so you can see that we can sort of dump the ground, and we can just continue on with the let's say tailoring the landscape to actually be part of the map itself by just hiding the ground. On the other hand, this gives us a kind of a marker kind of idea where we can build our landscape up to if we wanted to, or we could change this altogether, because obviously it's on a separate collision map, then it's not much of a problem or an issue to deal with. The fountain. Okay, map object wise, RC is working on a this. Some have pointed out this is, sleeping on it and thinking about it is not an appropriate type of fountain for this type of environment. It's a little bit gaudy. It fills up a little too much of a space, and it really doesn't fit in with the scheme overall. So Rabbit Cow has been working on a version of this, a water fountain that is a lot more fitting for this type of space. And we won't have all this gushing water come down. It might be just, a little, these little spigots with the water that you would normally see in a kind of Spanish type of water fountain, where it's more of a stream than it is a cascade like this. So we could just dump that, put the new one in, and recompile the lighting, and it's done without worrying, and everything and anything that is part of this as a component is contained into a separate file. So which of course, if you wanted to, instead of messing around with placement in here, you can open this file by itself, fit to placement, and then next time next time it gets loaded in, the map gets loaded in or updated, then it changes the object in three-dimensional space for you, without you actually having to now do the import and then all that management duty stuff of making sure it's placed, because somebody's already did all the work for you. So I thought that is probably about as interesting as things get right now. Blade Killer and I, and maybe a few others, we're working on a change to the overall character design pathway, which will be, I think, is super interesting. So we'll probably cover that one in hopefully not the too distant future. But this hopefully will give the idea that I'm trying to spark is there's no reason why a map could not be a co-op project onto itself, where you can have as many people as you wish working on using their all the skills in a particular area without stomping on somebody else's work. So in this case, somebody might be really good, like when it comes to lighting, I fake it a lot. I just I literally I was talking about earlier is I was sort of cruising through the marketplace, and I saw this asset for $10, and I go, well, for $10 you can't lose. An artist is all about his catalog of assets in hand, ready to go rock and roll, so they could go window shopping and not have to sit there and go, now how do I make this, and spend a week building it and then looking at it and say, it's crap. But in this case, it was $10, so I threw it in and it looked great. The lighting that you see, this is a little bit more tinty yellow than it's probably normally. We can change this to a little bit more orangey orange, which is what I believe the original was. But it has a much more softness to the lighting, and I just basically grabbed everything that I wanted as part of the about throwing this in as a master lighting level, as well as my outside mountain level. See, as I mentioned before, turn that off, or I can just turn it on and select that and make that my persistent. Okay, it's deciding that it doesn't want to play nice. Okay. Let's see. So everything outside the box, so to speak, that the player is in, is an area that I'm working on without having to worry about anybody getting in the way, and we can build this up over time. But the whole thing, everything you see in front of you as far as water and what have you, total is about $25, if that, and with reasonable assets too to boot. So master lighting. I stole that off the same aired asset without the mountain range into it, and I just, I was just playing, testing it, and then lo and behold, it worked. So, okay, so, and of course, if we want to bring in a texture artist who's really good at doing texturing and what have you, he can work on these by block as need be, and it doesn't have that same type of, well, I'm working on this part here, but I know that part also is part over here, kind of a thing, and I gotta match that up, and you're running around all over the place. Everything as far as a clean canvas goes, palette, we're ready to go for the next step. One last little bit here, I promise. Hopefully, there's a lot behind this map that's been going on that is secondary to building a map that players will play on. It's become kind of a really handy dandy type of a test space, so to speak. So anything that we're doing as far as I'm trying to mention here, as far as the development of creating environments, where it goes, is everything you need to know is all in this map, and we'll continue working on it. One last little thing is, of course, foliage. If we're going to add foliage, once again, that would be a separate layer. We'll call foliage layer, where we'll have somebody who's in. We'll have one come along or somebody who has excellent landscaping skills to come in and try to craft the the final look kind of deal, and as well as doing some material placement. So hopefully things will speed up a little bit more, and then the next episode we'll show something hopefully a little bit more impressive, and of course interesting, let's say. Okay, enough.